What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. Today I'm going to convince you why Ygra's not okay. But first, if you want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 whenever you sign up and you'll be supporting the channel. Additionally, you can become a patron. Shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsome and Irrelevant, you guys rock. Now let's get into why this guy's not okay. I actually had to go back to the drawing board with this guy and build him twice because during my brewing process, I was asking some of the patrons, some of the guys on the Discord for some feedback, and Newsome pointed out, hey, he actually makes all of the creatures on the battlefield food, not just ours, so doing that kind of makes us a very oppressive deck, because green has a plethora of cards that says, hey, when this card enters the battlefield, when this card deals combat damage, when this card does whatever, when another creature enters the battlefield, we're going to get to destroy an artifact or enchantment. So when all of our opponent's creatures are artifacts, that becomes very oppressive because we can just wipe their entire board and keep all creatures off of the battlefield. Not to mention, we can seamlessly slot in Viridian Revels, and this is going to draw us a ton of cards. The other kind of strategy we're going to lean into with this deck is a little bit of life gain synergies, and then additionally, we're going to include cards that want to die and want to be put into the graveyard, like Kakusho, the Evening Star. Now, since it's a food, we can pay 2 mana, gain 3 life, and then drain our opponents. Then we can, again, include stuff like Veto to drain the entire board, deal a ton of damage to our opponents, and then Ygra gets pretty big, so we get to seamlessly add in those Power Matter strategies in the Power Matter synergy cards like Savala, Greater Good, and this just all adds up to being a very powerful card and very oppressive deck at the same time. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. I want to start it off by saying I'm bringing it back. If we get this video to 700 likes, I will build a budget version of this deck for you guys that play budget. Now let's get into what the formatting of the video is going to be. We're going to kick it off by talking about the pieces that make this deck super oppressive to play against. Then we're going to move on to the life gain synergies and how we're going to get value off of sacrificing our creatures that are food. Finally, we'll talk about how this deck can outright win the game. After that, I did include a way to turn our graveyard into our hand. It is a Golgari deck after all. And then finally, we're going to talk about some very high synergy pieces that are going to pair amazingly with this deck and the strategy. Opening up with how we're going to make this super oppressive to play against, we are playing Liquid Metal Coating and Liquid Metal Torque. What these cards are going to do is basically just turn whatever we need, any permanent we want, into an artifact, and that's going to make it easy to destroy with this deck with the plethora of ways we have in this deck to destroy artifacts. Mycosynth Lattice is in the deck as well to turn everything, every permanent, into an artifact, including lands, so in the right case, we can just destroy everybody's lands. Gisa, Glorious Resurrector, and Vraska are going to allow us to actually steal the opponent's creatures that we're killing. So while we're wiping their entire board, they're just going to end up on our side of the board. And remember, those creatures are going to be food as well, so whenever they die due to them having decayed, that's just going to make our commander even bigger. Viridian Revel, another amazing card in this deck, because whenever we're killing our opponent's creatures, we're just going to draw a ton of cards. Foundation Breaker, Cankerbloom, Haywire Might, all cards that are amazing because not only do they sacrifice themselves, putting themselves in the graveyard, and again, they're food as well, so that makes our commander bigger, but whenever that happens, that's also additionally going to be able to kill one of our opponent's creatures. So that's essentially going to add 4 power to our commander since 2 food are dying here. Aberrant is pretty simple, but pretty amazing here. We're just going to dump a ton of mana into this guy. He's going to be massive, and then whenever he deals combat damage, we get to axe an artifact or enchantment, which again is just going to start killing our opponent's creatures and adding a ton of power to our commander. Kogla the Titan Ape, again, this guy enters the battlefield, he fights a creature, and then he's going to be able to attack, and whenever he attacks, you get to axe, you guessed it, an artifact and enchantment. Scion of Calamity is a special kind of messed up here, because this thing has Myriad. So let's just assume all 3 of these connect and we axe 3 of our opponent's creatures. That means that 2 of our Scion of Calamities are going to die because they had Myriad, and they were going to die anyway, so that's 2 food there, and then 3 of our opponents are going to lose their creatures because 3 Scions of Calamity connected, so we get his ability whenever Scion of Calamity deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment 3 times. So that's going to axe 5 foods there, and we're going to add 10 power to our commander. Rampaging Yogi is one of the cards we can pair with Mycosynth's Lattice to destroy all of our opponent's lands. This guy has an X ability that allows us to destroy X target artifacts or enchantments with mana cost equal to X. Notably, lands and tokens have CMC 0, so we can choose all of our opponent's lands and they're going to get destroyed by Yogi. This also works with any of our opponent's token strategies. They're going to get axed here, and then at the end of the day, you still do get to destroy creatures with mana value X or less, so it can axe some of their creatures as well. Steelbane Hydra, we pump a lot of X into this guy, and then he has an activated ability, remove a 1/1 counter from him, and we get to destroy any artifact or enchantment. Silverback Elder is especially messed up whenever you cast a creature spell, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and then you do get added utility. It synergizes with our life gain because we can also just gain 4 life, or we can look at the top 5 cards of our library and then put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. So this guy's just very flexible. Season of Gathering, I love this card here. It allows us to choose up to 5, and the paw prints are basically energy here, so you get to spend it. So we have the ability to choose destroy all artifact permanents, and then also draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, and then we're going to draw a ton of cards off of our commander while wiping the entire board of creatures and artifacts. Braid's Arisen Nightmare is solid tech here because this deck just hates out all of our opponent's artifacts and all of our opponent's creatures. So if we sacrifice a creature to Braids, 9 times out of 10 we're probably going to draw 3 cards. Let's talk about the life gain synergies. We have Ezerut Channeler. I had no idea this card existed before I started building this deck, but we can essentially sacrifice a food and then tap this guy, and all of our creatures are going to cost 5 CMC less. Now this is going to be extremely useful for all of our X spell creatures, and then additionally we do have some higher cost creatures that we're able to cast from our graveyard, and this just reduces their cost as a whole. So if we can get like a 6 loop going and keep casting something like a Gray Merchant for 2 black, that's going to be extremely powerful. Kakusho the Evening Star, this guy enters the battlefield, drains everybody for 5, and then we're going to gain 15 again. If we get a way to sacrifice this guy and cast him using 6, this is going to be amazing to do for 2 black mana if we have Ezerut on the battlefield. Gray Merchant, you know this guy's going to be in the deck. He drains a ton, and he's a win con in a lot of decks. Voltborn Tyrant is one I'm super excited to try out here. This guy can, remember, kill himself because he's a food, so we can easily pay 2 mana, and then he's going to end up in the graveyard. Then we can use any of our plethora of reanimation effects to bring him back onto the battlefield and repeat. And then we're just going to have an army of Voltborn Tyrants and draw a ton of cards and gain a ton of life. Remember, if we have Ezerut on the battlefield and we reduce his cost by 5, this is just going to be insane, especially when we will go over later how we can turn our graveyard into our hand essentially. Disciple of Freelease and Disciple of Bolus are pretty solid here. We do have a lot of life gain payoffs, so it's going to be solid to sacrifice a giant creature, draw a ton of cards, gain a ton of life, and then enjoy any number of our life gain payoffs like Willow Dusk, Veto, or even Blossoming Bogbeast. The Great Hinge is going to be amazing here. Our commander is going to make this cost 2 green, and then additionally get solid card advantage and incidental life gain. Witch's Clinic is going to be featured in this deck as well, giving our commander lifelink can gain us a ton of life. Sword of Light and Shadow just kind of fits with the graveyard theme, and then our creatures sacrificing themselves, and then additionally it is a little bit of incidental life gain. Veto, one of the ways we can win the game in this deck. We just gain a ton of life, and being able to turn that life gain into damage will just kill our opponents. Sylvan Library, Ripples of Undeath, and Black Market Connections are just cards I wanted to feature in this deck because we're able to full send every one of these. We can easily pay 3 life for Ripples of Undeath, 8 life of Sylvan Library, and 6 life for Black Market Connections every single turn, so it'd kind of be a crime not to run these. Witch of the Moors, another life gain payoff. Whenever we gain life, hey, we're just going to be able to make everybody sacrifice a creature at instep. And then we get to return a creature to our hand, so all of those Haywire Mites, Foundation Breakers, and Canker Blooms that we used in the early game are just going to come back to our hand and get reutilized to buff up our commander and kill our opponent's creatures. Willow Dusk is kind of cool here. We can gain a ton of life, and then we can use that life gain to make our creatures massive, and then again, there is a little bit of a Power Matters theme in here since our commander can get so big, so being able to buff up some of our other creatures as sacrifice is going to be really useful here. Last but not least, we have Vilis Broker of Blood. Not only is this amazing with with our Sylvan Libraries, our Ripples of Undeath, and our Black Market Connection effects. Additionally, he has a solid activated ability that's going to cause us to draw a ton of cards, and it can even axe our opponent's indestructible creatures. Moving on to how the deck wins. Now, 9 times out of 10, we're talking combat damage here. We're wiping everybody's creatures off the board. Our commander is going to get massive. This is actually a very solid Voltron deck, so I thought I'd include Nettle Cyst. Nettle Cyst is just going to seal the deal. 9 times out of 10, we can deal with any of the creature strategies, so you're looking for those control players. Start attacking their life total early, and then late game, if we get a Nettle Cyst on the battlefield, we can outright kill them with commander damage. Veto Thorn of Duskrose, with our plethora of life gain effects, this guy can kill our opponents in several different ways. Blossoming Bog Beast will turn all of the token fodder or all of the other cards in the deck into massive threats, especially when we kill our opponent with something like a Disciple of Bolas. Maybe we draw 20 cards, gain 20 life, and then boom, all of our creatures are 20/20s with trample. That's kind of insane. Camilla and Experimental Confectioner are kind of messed up in this deck because they both generate a creature token whenever we sacrifice a food. The only problem there is the creature tokens that we now created with the Experimental Confectioner or Camilla are also food tokens. So these two with any sack outlet, which I did include 2 in the deck, Ashnod's Altar and Warren Soul Trader, you can generate infinite mana and infinite food tokens that can then sacrifice themselves for infinite life. And you're able to sacrifice those food tokens because, again, you have infinite mana. So generate infinite mana, sack all the food you want, and now you got infinite life. The crazy thing about that combo and why I think it's okay in this deck is it actually doesn't win us the game. We need a payoff to use our infinite mana on, or we need a payoff for that infinite life. So just something to think about. We do have the option for Skull Clamp as one of our payoffs, right? After we generate infinite mana, we can draw our deck with Skull Clamp, and then Pitiless Plunder is just another way we can get value off of sacrificing our creatures. And again, if you have infinite creatures, you just get infinite treasure tokens. Moving on, let's talk about how we can turn our graveyard into our hand. I'm talking about using 6 and Life from the Loam with a way to draw cards. Something like a Great Hinge, even Voltborn Tyrant or Villas work perfectly here, and that's just going to allow us to dredge Life from the Loam, put it back into our hand, then we can cast Life from the Loam, return 3 lands to our hand, and 6 gives everything retrace. So as long as we have mana to cast spells, we can cast anything from our graveyard, and we've essentially turned our graveyard into our hand. We really do want a way to generate a ton of mana to really take full advantage of this, so using stuff like an Ygra Channeler to reduce the cost of all of our creatures, or something like Selvala Heart of the Wilds to tap for a bunch of mana, even something like Ruthless Technomancer here can really make this seem like a very viable strategy to outvalue our opponents. We're also running Eternal Witness. This is just going to allow us to bring our instant or sorceries, anything that's not a permanent, back to our hand. Chthonian Nightmare is an amazing sack outlet, and then additionally it allows us to reanimate all of our low cost creatures, and then eventually if we build up enough energy, our high cost creatures as well. Animate Dead, super solid, just 2 mana reanimates any creature. Meren of Clan Nel Toth, again, really good in these grindy Golgari decks that are really trying to outvalue our opponents over the course of time. She just gives us solid advantage. She can return all our Kinkerbloom effects in the early game, and then again in the late game she just becomes a monster that can recur anything. Ruthless Technomancer, solid here, solid recursion, solid ramp. This does everything we need for the Power Matters portion of the deck. Agadeem's Awakening is a mass reanimation spell. You have to pump a bunch of mana into this, but it can essentially rebuild your entire board. Let's talk about those high synergy cards. I love running Gruff Triplets here. Gruff Triplets need a sack outlet to be really good. Well, our commander turns all of our creatures into their own sack outlet, right? Because everything's a food. So for 2 mana, you can sacrifice the main copy of Gruff Triplets and then just keep reanimating to make a massive army of Gruff Triplets. This is going to be the perfect deck for that strategy, and I'm so excited to do this to someone. Guillaume is a solid food generator, and then additionally, he can sacrifice food to give us indestructible, which is going to be very notable because people are going to try to kill our commander. They don't like him. The Skullspore Nexus, we're going to be sacrificing some pretty massive creatures, and even then just doubling the power of our commander to deal combat damage and kill one of our opponents seems like a solid strategy as well in this deck. Greater Good is my go-to card advantage for these graveyard strategies. You don't even need that big creatures to include this card because the discard is almost welcomed. Selvala Heart of the Wilds can be solid card advantage, but 9 times out of 10 she just taps for a ton of mana. Altar of the Wretched is just an amazing way to mill a ton of cards and draw a ton of cards at the same time. Smeagol Helpful Guide is just going to add to the salt-inducing nature of this deck. I have had people scoop with this guy because you just steal the land drop they've been waiting for 3 turns off the top of their library. It's incredibly hilarious, and honestly, this guy just provides some solid ramp. Secure Tribe Elder and Rampant Rejuvenator are just 2 cards that are just going to ramp us solidly, and then again, Rampant Rejuvenator can kill itself in this deck, so that's going to be very good here. That's going to bring us to the end of our deck tech. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsome, Irrelevant, Praetor, Chicken Salad, and Excessum. You guys all rock. I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you guys in the next one.